are you really going through with this?
Barcha is a first-person psychological horror game where you play as a man named Hannibal who breaks into a mansion to find money to pay for his daughter's medical bills. The game was a gift from the developers and is available on Steam.
This isn't the way. What if you get caught? What if you never see her again?
And what if I do nothing? Just sit there and watch her suffer. I've tried everything, every damn thing.
Did you tell your wife?
No, she still thinks I have a job.
Atmosphere. The game uses shaded lighting and sparse environments to try and create an off-kilter feeling, and certain things like the blank stares of the characters also give it a sense of the surreal, but it's not clear how much of this is deliberate. The atmosphere is plagued by a plethora of bugs and off-putting design choices. There's UI problems, the reticulous present during cutscenes, lots of animation problems with both characters and enemies looking and acting incredibly robotically, locked door warnings popping up during dialogue, and it's seemingly voiced by AI actors. In general, it's an extremely rough experience. There are some brief moments of tension when you slip into what seems to be an alternate dimension, and these moments are the highlight of the game, though they are brief as the game would always move on to something else as soon as the atmosphere started to get almost good. There was a chance of building tension from the gameplay when you had to hide from enemies, but most of the time this led more to comedy than horror, since the enemy AI can only seemingly detect you if you walk right into it, and some of the hiding spots you were told to hide behind really couldn't be considered hiding spots.
This is unacceptable, Emin. I stood there today in front of everyone trying to pay for a single LV bag. Just one. And your card declined. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?
Ashkum, not now. You think I care about a damn handbag right now? I have bigger problems, Ashkum.
The start of the game also spent a lot of time in dialogue building up the backstory, and these sections were good for the story, but contained little to no atmosphere and ended up being difficult to pay attention to. There was a room full of bodies that felt like it should have aesthetically invoked a feeling of foreboding or disgust, but it ended up feeling out of place since nothing else in the game was remotely like it, and ended up feeling strange. Ironically, even some of the game's jump scares and scripted events also ended up hurting the atmosphere more than they helped it, with again, animation problems and immersion-breaking bugs and design choices plaguing them. It's obvious this is the developer's first game, and there's a lot of learning curves that come along with that, but sadly it does feel like the game needed a lot more time to iron out bugs and refine things, since it really ended up destroying the atmosphere. That's no Harry Masons. Scares. The game uses jump scares and stealth sections to try and spook the player, but sadly the jump scares themselves felt largely cheap, with things appearing out of nowhere and charging at you followed by a loud noise. Quite a lot of them were more confusing than frightening, but despite this there were one or two that worked surprisingly well at startling the player, even if they were still cheap scares. Some of them may have felt less cheap had the atmosphere been there, but sadly it was too far gone. The stealth sections that involved hiding from enemies had the player trying to avoid the two ghost-like entities as they moved around an area, but again, the enemies only seemed to be able to detect you if you walked right into them, so it was just a case of moving around them. Without any atmosphere or tension to it, this felt like a chore. One section saw a shadow crawling up a corridor, and things like the animation of the crawling, the ease of avoidance, and the creature disappearing into the ground when you passed it just left the experience feeling like you dodged the world's slowest bullet. There was no feeling of intensity or fear to any of it, and it ended up only standing out because it was oddly funny. The game's scares were as unrefined as other parts of the game, and when it did work at startling the player, it ended up feeling cheap. Again, it feels like more time refining animations and working on the atmosphere would have made some of the jump scares feel less cheap. Having a sensory range for the ghost enemies would have been essential in a stealth section. The shadow needed to be faster to make running away from it feel more of a fight for survival and less of a mundane chore.
Who touched my
That's
TV?
still no Harry
Sure,
Mason's.
I turned it off before heading downstairs. Maybe it's something to do with that compass. Seems like it's extra reactive at night. I'll check it out. Everything else seems fine. I'll quickly finish up downstairs, then come back to work on the compass.
Sound design. Barcha has no soundtrack, leaving you in silence for most of the game, and whilst it sometimes adds a level of eeriness, it usually just feels lacking instead. Though there is some incidental music, pieces that play when something happens, and these small pieces can be pretty good. One is an imposing, heavy thudding and a deep reverb that creates this sense of age and foreboding, which ended up being the one that stood out the most. The sound effects are pretty generic and some don't quite match the things they've been added to, like creaking floorboards for a painting falling off the wall, but it's really only immersion breaking for those who pay attention to it. Where the sound design really falls apart is the AI sounding voice acting, with line delivery so painfully wooden that it ruins any sort of sentiment or sense of urgency that the dialogue could have delivered. This, alongside those strange camera angles, character models, and weird animations of the dialogue sections, made characters talking to each other possibly the most unnatural thing in the game.
Listen to me. You think I'm distant because of work? No, Ashkam. It's because I've something that should not exist.
A few sound effects suffer from a lack of directional audio, like the dog barking was one of the few jump scares that actually worked, but the sound clip doesn't sound part of the environment when you move or turn in-game, and there's no dog present at all, and just ends up feeling like a cheap scare by playing a random sound clip. It's not uncommon to use AI voices due to budget constraints, but it's very difficult to justify using them when the impact on the dialogue delivery is this severe. Music would have also made the dialogue-heavy sections of the early game feel less boring and added a lot more atmosphere to parts of the game. The rest are small gripes, but there's a lot of improvement to be made here. That's still no Harry Mason's. Gore. There's a bit of blood, some bagged up corpses, and one part has totems made out of skeletons, but that's about it. It's unclear why these are here, but they are still fun to see. That's one Harry Mason. Story. The story is of Hannibal, a man who's recently been fired and needs money to pay for his daughter's medical bills. He ends up travelling to a mansion to steal items of worth when he overhears information about a strange compass with special abilities, and before he knows it, he's in another dimension. The game story is interesting in premise, but the delivery leaves a lot to be desired due to how much of the story is told through dialogue. But whilst the writing itself can be interesting, it can also feel irrelevant, with details added to things that never go anywhere or add anything to the game. But at the same time, there are little things that reveal Hannibal as a character, spending time at the firing range and his interactions with a girl named Asia who seems interested in him despite his wife, and they clearly have a history, but again, this doesn't really seem to go anywhere. The game doesn't have diary entries, but instead has a series of notes you can pick up at one point in the game that talk about things like the curse of Tutankhamun or cryptids, which were fun reads, but didn't really seem to have anything to do with the story. The backstory of the alternate dimension is fairly generic, with a group of researchers that went in and never came out, but it's still a fun attempt, even if very messy in its delivery. The game is wrapped up near the end with a single choice that stated it would affect the ending, but it's so obvious which one was which that it's transparently just choosing the ending you want. Ultimately, the story had some redeeming points and some entertaining ideas, but it also had several problems too and seemed unfocused, making the final score 2 out of 5 Harry Masons. Barcha needed more time and attention to detail. There were so many different problems popping up at the same time that it was difficult to take the game seriously, and I ended up laughing more than I ended up feeling afraid. It also suffered heavily from performance problems, with none of the limited settings providing anything close to a smooth frame rate, but hopefully the developers keep going and learning from their time with Barcha. Again, I'd like to remind you the whole thing is down to my opinion in horror games, and if you don't share this opinion, then that's cool, I get it. I'd like to point out that whilst I'm now a seasoned stealth master, I didn't get caught in the mansion and advise you don't either. There will be more horror reviews in the pipeline, and thanks for watching. Always go check out Bumps in the middle of the night. Peace.